Welcome to Listening with China Blue. This is a podcast that focuses on how listening not only informs us about what is occurring in the world around us, but also helps us connect with others, build stronger businesses, strengthens our mental health, and become more creative and compassionate individuals. As more and more people practice attentive listening in a community, it becomes a community-building practice that strengthens our mental health as we learn from our neighbors. I will be interviewing people from all walks of life to learn how listening has informed them in their field and helped them to make intelligent decisions. They will be artists, musicians, composers, dancers, business people, psychologists, neuroscientists, and Buddhists, to name a few. About me, I'm an internationally exhibiting sound-based artist. In my work, Discovering Unheard Sounds, I realized that the core component that drove my work was simply listening. That realization put me on the path of speaking about and helping people learn to become better listeners. I began with leading sound walks, which I continue to do in the upstate New York region to help people learn to listen from nature. And now, tune your ears to this podcast to learn about the power of listening. And do pay attention until the end for further information on how to start your own listening practice, share it with others, and to support Listening with China Blue. My next guest is Tiokasin Ghosthorse, who is a member of Itezipkoa and Minikuju Lakota of the Sakuin Oyate. He draws upon the language, history, culture, philosophy, and traditions of the Indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. He is a survivor of the Reign of Terror from 1972 to 1976 in the Lakota reservations in South Dakota, and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding and church missionary school systems, which were designed to kill the Indian and save the man. Tiokasin also has a long history of Indigenous activism and advocacy, as he spoke as a 15-year-old at the United Nations in Lake Geneva, Switzerland. Tiokasin was a 2016 nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize from the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. He is the founder, host, and executive producer of First Voices Radio, which is syndicated in over 120 community, public, and commercial radio stations in the U.S. and Canada. Additionally, he is a master musician, known for performing worldwide in over 50 countries. Tiokasin is also a co-author of the forthcoming Earth Mind and published Butterfly Against the Wind. He describes himself as a perfectly flawed human being and is most importantly a Sundancer in the cosmology of the Lakota Nation. Welcome, Tiokasin. I'm so excited to have you here to learn about listening from your culture. From an earlier conversation, I discovered how deep this topic is, and I'm so excited that we're going to delve into it today.
Listening is a very important part of who we are, and I want to extend my greetings to you, China, and for the invite. And I'm excited actually for this because it's very few and very not very often that I get to speak this way with human beings.
Oh, nice. I'm glad we opened a portal into another world.
Yeah. Yeah. Chante washte na pe juza pielo, le unki piki hohe washtelo. That is a greeting to you with my heart in my hand, and I extend it to you and all that your ancestors represent. So that's basically a cosmological language that it's beyond just you. It's including your ancestors, wherever they come from.
Oh, how beautiful. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. So, I kept on thinking about how deep and wide this conversation can be, but I thought maybe we could talk a little bit first, maybe to talk about listening to the earth as a starting point, and we'll see where this goes.
Okay. Wow. Now, that statement, we could talk hours about that.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Anamagopta is listening. Maka Anamagopta means listening to the earth. And also, Wichakpi Anamagopta means also to listen to the stars at the same time. So if we listen to Earth, which is a star, we listen to the stars. And that's our communication, metaphorically, I guess you would say in English, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also a reality for a lot of indigenous peoples who see the stars and the plants, the animals, the rocks, earth, water, sky. So it's not ever disconnected. It's always an embodiment of who we are, um, without going too far outside the duality of English, which is very limited in our language. There's more than duality, so it's beyond that. And so I want to say that, um, listening is, you go outside into nature and you sit down with nature. You take your shoes off. You put your feet down. You automatically, like, your feet become the ears, and that's absorbing vibration, um, sound, movement, all at once, and your body registers that and helps you keep connected. The word would be, so you feel relationship. And so, to make it short, it's like, that we are uploading from Earth. She's feeding us everything we need to know energetically, metaphorically, spiritually, physically. And that one word, anamahoptaye, um, means listening here on Earth or with Earth. Um, and I think part of that is not just the ears or thinking we are actually listening or hearing, because a deaf person can feel the same thing as a person who can hear. And I think in a language that divides that, it takes much more words, many more words to explain the one word that we have, which is a multi-dimensional word. And so the levels that say Anamahoptaya or Anamahoptaye, Anamahopta, are actually talking about your perspective. Um, and so there's dimensional languages that also come with Earth. It's like seeing different colors, but it's that we only are limited as human beings to see only certain colors, but other places, other beings see much more color than we do. So our ability to listen also means that you have to be with that which listens to you the most, which is Earth. It's a listening ability that we had in these last few, since I was small, a child. I've noticed the disconnection due to civilization, and that we are away from the natural processes. So we don't hear as well as we could, and that potential is there. And that's what I look towards China, is that the potential of listening is there, just that we have been uh, detoured away from it because
Mm-hmm.
of our technology, and I could say religion and science. They've all become very monotheistic and put us into a certain dogma. that we have answers when we know, at least in the Lakota, that everything is a mystery and that we do not have to solve it because that's not our responsibility. The mystery already knows and has solved us. That's why we are here. So we'll never solve the mystery. So what I'm trying to say, um, because how do I say this in English? Mystery is it's not a deep definition. It's a meaning. Even that doesn't suffice for what I'm feeling. Um, if we try to solve mystery, it makes us crazy. You see, science and religion and all those, disciplines are after something. They think they get it and got it, and they find out that's not the answer. When the answer is there is no answer, and never will be. And so that takes us out of rhythm with really truly listening to and with Earth through her radar, I suppose. Wow, can't believe I'm putting so many words into this. The radar of Earth as she listens to her brothers and sisters, if I may, with those things in another language called Neptune and Uranus and the moon and Jupiter, all those foreign words for planets. And so it's communication.
Mhm.
And I do not think that we are listening to true communication because we made things so anthropocentric that that view leaves out the necessity to be in relationship with Earth, with nature, which has the natural abilities, diminished our natural abilities.
And you had mentioned also about how people have become distanced from the circadian rhythms, which should help us be more in tune with the earth.
Yes, that's in explaining the easy ways. You get up with Earth, you get up with the sunshine. Um, you you know when the sun is high and when it goes down. That's simple. But there's much more than just timing. It's like, what do you do with Earth? And are you actually being a mechanical person with a watch and saying, well, the sun's going to come up at 6:30, I'm getting up then? And do you apply Western philosophy logic to Earth? Because that's not going to work,
Mm-hmm.
because we're trying to adapt Earth to our needs. So when we see these things naturally, you see babies, you see people who grow up with land, that they are in a rhythm, and you look for clocks in their house and you don't find any. Like in this apartment, there is no clock. I can't see any clocks. And so, but being away from the the revolutions of Earth, the spring, the seasons, which there are 8 to us, you get you lose that sense of rhythm, and so your body is feeling the stress and duress of being away and having to live through, what time is it? And so that's the difference between understanding the circadian and what comes naturally with the rhythm. And that comes along with, people say, spirituality. We say that too. We say Wakan. It's a word that expresses to consciously apply mystery to everything. Because life goes on past what we define as death. So it's a continuum, and there's not So I'm thinking, what's a good example? No sunshine is alike. Therefore, we've never been here. You and I never done this before. It's all new to us. And it's like we're being born constantly. We're being in rhythm with each other. Well, that also you will find comes with being in rhythm with Earth. It's always refreshing. So what you can say in English to define the morning, it's very odd because when I learned English, morning meant two things in English. The morning or the grieving, then there was the morning. And I got very confused when I was little. And so I learned to take those words they're trying to say in English, the feeling, and retranslate or refeel them from my language, which is ihane washtelo, which means something beautiful is happening. And it truly is. If it's rainy, it's snowy, it's a cold day, but it's still beautiful. And that kind of conveys your attitude with life, and without dividing it into positive or negative, right? That's very anyway, that's very pathological. There's always got to be a cause and effect. So when you're applying or conscious, your conscious ability to apply mystery to everything, that whole circadium, in a sense, opens up with your natural rhythm to be able to be conscious and not conscience, the consciousness of who you are with Earth. And that is an ability I think we all have deep inside of us, but the layers of logic and science and religion, what else is there that have kind of cloaked it or diluted it? So we're looking desperately for that wisdom once again. And so that's a long way of answering that question.
Oh, but no, it's a very beautiful way too, because it talks so much, it expands the idea of listening to language, to the cosmos, to because as Western, in this Western world, things are divided up and segregated to categories, as you are well aware. And so having a viewpoint that is embracive of everything instead of slicing it up into small, tiny pieces, I find it to be quite a beautiful and, um, enthusiastic approach to living, because we are living on this earth with all these other people, with nature, with everything that we are surrounded with. And it makes sense to me that the world should be viewed from an inclusive vantage point versus exclusive. The us against them kind of approach always seems to me to be quite limited.
Yes, quite in the sense of I sense when I'm speaking English, there's always a conflict and this antagonism. So did I say the right thing, or was that correct? And that sort of judgment or measuring to what is standard codified as to the right answer, the wrong question, the right question is very limited. So in that way of a lot of indigenous peoples, there is no such thing as right or wrong because there cannot be. And I think, what we do not understand is that insightful, that insightful, that insightfulness that we carry. Again, I'll say it's there. it's that relationship that's kind of receding because we become GMO, GMO, GMO spiritually. You see, because our food,
Yeah.
a way of living, it's artificial. And that's what we're not, we're confused and we're confusing ourselves as to what's real anymore. So virtual and artificial, all these words that people accept so readily is that they don't want to be here. And why wouldn't you want to be with a beautiful earth? And if you had a beautiful culture, why would you want to destroy beautiful cultures? And all these new inventions, new ideas, new ways of living and born and birthing and dying, it's very limited.
Well, that really speaks to this topic of listening in the sense of listening in language. And one of the things that I'm thinking about when I'm listening to you speak is how you are negotiating between the two cultures, the one you were raised in and the westernization of your culture and the struggles, the internal struggles that you are constantly involved in to negotiate these two kinds of worlds and to not only communicate in them, but also to communicate your viewpoints as well as finding a way to present yourself in a way that makes sense to you.
Yeah. And that is an ongoing since this society, because, and I'm sorry, China, I can't call this society a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because if you really look at what culture is, Mickey Mouse and McDonald's is not a culture. It's based on fantasy in a sense,
It
and
is.
idealism,
Mm-hmm.
what's in the future, what could be, not what's here. As it seems that we are dissatisfied with what this is, that we can make a better world, we can make a better housing situation. So these become very unpragmatically about humans only, which is not going to fit Earth because, again, we're still extracting to live, and yet the life source is being resourced out of its own life. So our life support system, which is much more than a physical thing, because if you don't think that Earth is spiritual, then what are you? If Earth is has a religion, then why do humans have a religion? In history, that that ability to for us as Lakota in this case, is they took that ability to have our own spirituality because they could not understand that we did not have a God or a devil,
Mm-hmm.
that everything was alive. That's our language. And for 100 years, they took it away until 1978. And then now you're hearing this kind of thought process. That's a baby thought process here in the West, but it's a start, I think, which should have been ongoing all this time. The 500 years that mindset has landed. As I stood there 500 years ago, the view from the shore, watching the ships come, and that view on the shore as opposed to on the ship is a very different perspective. And coming with the aggressions and everything it came with,
Mm-hmm.
um, the ideas, the religions, the governments, the laws, all those are from another place where we had and have still. It's not talked about very much, dismissed because people don't want to know about this land. Not that we owned it, but that we learned how to live with other beings here rather than, okay, this is our rules, you're going to live here. Because the rules, the laws of nature come naturally with Earth. So we live by those laws, so to speak. But the one thing that didn't come with from the ships is they did not come with the land. You know, that's a big difference. When they lay down foreign laws, ideas, religion on a land that they don't understand, there is going to be confusion with the people who support the same laws, religions, the logic that come from Greece, that come from the Romans, the Western way to think, how to solve problems. You know, that is very foreign, and I deal with that because I'm educated in a Western way too. But the culture is not culture because it seems to be trendy. And that's the image of, like, we're fooling ourselves that we have culture when it's really about Earth. And as you see, sustainability.
Right. And I think it's important to talk about Earth and talk about the mushrooms and the trees. And you had mentioned earlier about listening to the trees. Can you tell us about how that evolves as I don't want to say practice. It seems so putting it into a package, but as an activity.
Yeah, well, so I'm being inclusive here, including the way I have to live with this society. Is that the language itself speaks for itself, as in Lakota, a word for tree is chan, a word for living is eh. And so we do not have a word for heart, but yet we understand a chante, which is heart in English, is also a tree, living tree-ing. So if it's a verb, vibrating. And so how did we know that our heart is like a tree which grows branches up up to the sky and into the earth, as the same body, you know, gives the same nervous system? And how do you know that? And how did we get taught that from simply living and observing, living with Earth? For example, when I was a younger man and reading, quite interested in, you know, engineering and sound, a little bit like you are, but with a lean to indigenous thought and how we understood the science from the West. So I read an article, it must have been late 80s, early 90s, where there was a small group of indigenous peoples who lived in, oh, I forget which country, north of Panama, Costa Rica, I think it was. There was these 13 stones, and they were pillars like stones, maybe 15, 16, 20 feet tall. And the people, the tribe, quote unquote, would come, and the young girl was given a mallet, and the people would sit, and she took the mallet and would hit strike the first rock. Then they would sit for hours, and then they pick up and go to the next rock and hit that and listen to the tone of it. Well, one year, a person from one of the major Ivy League institutions went and was observing, a cultural anthropologist, went with them and wanted to know what they were doing. So he asked them, he said, we're listening to the rocks, we're listening to a song. And he couldn't hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so he thought, well, they're, this won't fit. That there'll be a mystery. It'll be something that's very primitive or what mysterious. And so he came back the next year, and he brought special equipment to pick up sound, and he brought a few graduate students with him. So when the indigenous peoples went to hit the rocks again, they picked up sound. And so, how can you hear without science? How could you hear without proving this? So, going back to the heart, we named it, or say we didn't name it, it named us. So, the Cha was here before humans. Our bodies are kind of like a tree, and we understood that that's living tree. And our hearts are like the same. And so when we go with nature and among the trees, that's we understood that for hundreds of thousands of years, according to that timeline to the west. But we don't we go through the seasons because a tree records seasons also, and the ability to know how to listen is given to us in this case intuitively with our hearts. So listening has to do a lot with intuition in our a lot of indigenous people's ways.
Wow. That's, I, you know, I don't know where to go with that because it's so beautiful. It's just a beautiful way to live in the world and to think about and just I guess it's kind of an acceptance of existence, of the moment, living in the moment and living with your senses alert to the sounds that you might or might not hear. And and the world that you might not see. It's being attuned.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, how do you say it? So I mentioned there's 8 seasons.
Yeah.
We are in between seasons right now, coming to the end of the second season of the year, according to that Gregorian calendar or Julian calendar, whatever we go by. So there was winter. Then there was this +3 changing of the seasons into spring.
Mm-hmm.
We at the end of that +3 season. That's the second season. Third season will be spring.
Mm-hmm.
And then there'll be spring changing to summer. There's a season between that. So to us, there's 8 seasons, which go along with, in the Western way, Greek way is Pleiades. There are 8 stars. So we follow the 8 stars. And how do I say that? Um, Nipa is our word for that cluster of stars in the sky. That's our origin story. We come from the Pleiades, and that's still far fetched in the Western mind
Mm-hmm.
because the Western mind say, prove it. It's automatically, if you can't prove it, then it's not real. But, you could go to the religions, and we could say, prove it. And it's usually some sky god or goddess, some dogma. And we don't have that. That everything here is that entity, so-called God. Well, Kantanka is our word for what you would say God, but it's not Great Spirit either. So it's a mystery that's everywhere that can never be solved. So again, You see how I could go crazy trying to explain mystery to you and trying to solve it with our little so-called intellectualism or intelligence of, of, of religion and science and whatever we think we are as humans. And it all goes back to, personally, I want to know, why wouldn't we want to be here? Why are we doing this to the mother, to Mother Earth? What is keeping us away? Is it the fact that we, um, as human beings, underneath the, in our subconscious, know that we are destroying the very beauty because of apparent thought that we have now? Um, and like the value of greed that it is now prevalent is more acceptable than the value of giving. And we could say, "Oh, I'm not that way. I always give," but it's the way you live also. The values of the Lakota come through for me because those are the values I learned, which are all earth-based spiritualities.
Well, yes, and this is
Language.
becoming evident that we have to live with our world. We have to support and make a new living environment for our bees, for example, to give them a world where they can survive and flourish. I think finally this is becoming quite evident that we have to respect the life of the bee and respect how things are impacting these other creatures that we live with.
Yes, it's very true, which makes me come up with this automatic answer, which is, we do not have a word or concept for domination.
Mm.
So we can't say our world, our be possessive. So we can't say that because that's disrespectful. Our earth. And can we prove that it's our earth? And if it's that possession and it's supposed to be dear and to us as humans, why are we treating our earth so badly? So you see, it has to go beyond the possessive words, our, mine,
Hmm.
my.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree with you completely. I am thinking a lot about the topic of listening because it's a topic of our conversation. And to go into this particular realm is, I find, really quite compelling, um, and worth pursuing. Absolutely. And yet, in relationship to language and if we can bring it back to listening somehow, would be a good thing.
Yes. See.
Because it's an listening is inclusive, ultimately. It is embracing of every sound and every uh, acoustic energy that surrounds us, whether we feel it. Maybe the people that were listening to the Stones actually could feel the sound rather than hearing it with literally with their ears. They could feel the vibrations, for example. Or as you were saying, when you put your feet on the earth, you're feeling the vibrations of the earth.
Mm.
And it's inclusive in the sense that you can hear things that are very, very close to you, as well as, you know, bird songs that are extremely far away, for example, or the trees as they're shivering in the wind. And all these natural, all these elements of our world are actually have their own language and they're communicating to us. The trees are communicating that it's windy. The birds are communicating their song to each other. or their fights with each other. Um, and so there's this broader realm that I think a lot about, because it's a world that humans have a tendency to ignore in favor of sight.
Yes, it's limited. It's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and beyond the limitations is what I'm trying to express. So we have a language that I am told and haven't experienced yet. In the Lakota language, there, I could say there's 22 levels, no, 22 dimensions and 6 levels to understand what water wants, what air, light, wind, what do they want? Is that because we hear it, we think we're listening to it? Or as spirit beings as they are, they make us live too? Are we listening to their desires to keep things clean? This is where I think the limitations of this language we're talking now
Mm-hmm.
has been accepted too easily, because it's a controlled language. Our environment, we talked about this before, and almost sounds like I'm criticizing, but I'm not, or judging, but I'm not. It's a reality check. And it's not a mic drop. It's a reality check, because how does the earth view us? Does she see us and says, okay, you're hurting me? We as humans are worried about, oh, we cause pollution, we'll clean it up. But that's not good enough, because that takes money, and that's a controlled solution. How much money you go through the government? It's not an everyday thing, because even the so-called clean living people, I see what they have and hold on to through privilege, and how the classes system delegates how much you know through information and knowledge, which
Mm-hmm.
we have so much of information and knowledge. China is, and it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. We need that. But one thing that we are missing, because of how I see it here, is that everyone is thirsty for wisdom. None of that is here. We want, how do you live without Western education? You go to the reservation I'm from, you don't find educated people, Western. You find learned people who have experience with Earth, and they know how much it takes to, the word is not justice with Earth or reciprocity. It's a natural flow of hearing, the wind, seeing the light. What do they want? And we forgot that. We've forgotten that. And so it's always an extractive one-way street. So we always are extracting, and we don't know what the wind wants. We're afraid. We're afraid of nature. Excuse me. So we are afraid of nature, and we dread bad days, windy days, lightning. In my culture, we welcome it, because that's who we are also. So I could say, well, I'm ill today, and want to be better. That's something that we do. But is the earth ill today and wants to be better and wait for that. But she's not hoping to be better. She's doing something about it now. She's doing what's required, not hoping.
Hmm.
So I think that's the practicality of what I'm trying to convey is that if you don't have hope in your language, you have to do something that's required. And you can prepare all you want, dig holes and put your supplies in there, wait for the atom bomb to go off. See, the fear of this, of ourselves, well, what humans have created with that information and technology or knowledge has gone too far. So, one of my older brothers would say, they have created something, they will create something that they will not be able to control after a while. And that's true. And this was said 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And you go back into the prophecies, talks about how did you hear these prophecies? Is because there is no such thing as prophecy. There are teachings because the indigenous peoples listened to the earth. So we listen to the earth, which are teachings. And do we have that rather than some eventful prophecy where everybody thinks it's a magical thing? It's a difference between perspectives. And I don't think many Americans have that perspective of the truer culture that's here thousands and thousands of years before 1492. And that is strong. And we're not going to put it into books. We're not going to say, you have to live this way. That's not good for us to say that.
Sure, sure.
You know, so we try to sustain what we've been listening to, the teachings of those peoples who've come through this cycle.
So, what do the teachings tell you then about what the earth is saying?
Well, that's a big question. It's a good question. What do the teachings tell us about what the earth is saying? See if I can put this into an answer. So, if the teachings are saying, according to the stars, according to how other planets are conveying their messages in communication with Earth, sisters and brothers, sun, moon, stars, and the life that comes here and leaves is that you pay attention to now, this moment, and not in the present or the past. Because if the language is about being alive and conscious to this moment, it makes sense. Because the future does not make too much sense. Neither does the past, because you cannot change it. We're either grieving it or apprehensive about what we don't know. So all of that, ancestors, we say, go into the future because my mother and father passed, my grandfathers passed first. So they went ahead into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Since so those are the teachers, that the things that they have taught me and how to listen with earth, not to the earth, but with earth. So earth is teaching us how to listen rather than us defining how do we listen to the earth, because the teachings have not gone anywhere. They are still here. Now it's like this all over the world, or was at one time, but that's called primitive now.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been hammered with this is the only way to think. So at the beginning of this interview, I have to codify everything into so that English people, speakers, listeners can hear and try to understand what I'm saying. But the feeling is much bigger than the definition
Mm-hmm.
that I'm conveying here. So it's an energy. The language is about energy. We have these, we could say 20 or so sounds in Lakota. We'll take the Greek alphabet, the the ba, the cha, the ka, da, ma, ka, ha, ka, la, na, ma, pa, sa, sha, ta, va, wa, all these words, ja, we have, those are definable energies. And if you look at a certain part of the earth, your relationship with humans, beings, everyone conveys a different energy. And so you walk through this society knowing that energy. It's not about, oh, I'm going to stand over you and heal you, because you cannot individually heal that. You must come with the wisdom of earth. So listening means that you are always in a healing mode. And the word for prayer, Ochekia, is simply acknowledging relationship, because that's the wisdom. But the information, the knowledge is connecting. Let's connect this information with that knowledge, and therefore we'll be spiritual. We'll take this plant, mushrooms or ayahuasca or something, so that we can connect. If you walk away from that and there's no relationship, there's no cultural background with earth except extractive, the way to extract from it and get a little individual high or self-help, because it's become too individual. No one is in relationship. So listening ability is, we want to be number one, is based on our ego. And a part of that listening is the ego is minimal. So when you speak Lakota, there is no I, me, my, mine, or ours. So you're automatically inclusive. So to codify all that meaning into a definable, so we can put a period behind it and move on to the next concept. Where in Lakota, there are no concepts. It's a moving language, the energy. And that's why we need to be present to move with the energy.
And you had said that also listening is always being in the healing mode. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Again, through the language, the colors, the 260 languages, colors, the 260 directions, not this 4, 5, or 7. Is listening beyond it's listening to the dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the language of energy that we have, we're able to listen not to just this dimension here that we are sort of in among others in this earth. There are dimensions, and the depths of the language describe the listening ability to the other dimensions. This is a difficult one because we're looking for an answer. So if you say EMC equals relativity or something, EMC squared plus beyond, that's Lakota. Because we know we're dealing with other than self. So when we are praying, Ochekia, acknowledging relationship, not just to other human beings, but with all, seen and unseen. The example would be smoke that disappears. Where'd it go? You know, there was smoke there one time. It's not there now. So where did it go? But accepting the unseen without fearing it, I think would solve, and if anything, would help solve our fear. Um, so, what is prayer? What is healing? The healing, all we know, comes from earth. The way to live with earth and not some pharmaceutical based on human, I don't know, reductionism. It's done already. Earth can do that already. So the great pharmacist would be earth, the healing, giving you songs, giving you earth, giving you air, water, food, to live with a clean spirit. And so you see the sort of dichotomy that we've gotten ourselves into
Mm-hmm.
as humans and human beings. So I do think there is a difference between humans and human beings. Yeah, and I'm not saying that just to divide us, but there has to be a sense of reality is to not what we become. So healing would be, how do I say it? No fear of dying, because it doesn't really exist. And it seems like most of these medicines, Western medicines, are all to prevent and prolong life. And so we fear dying, and that works on us psychologically. And that part of that listening process is allowing to talk about death, think about it, to live it every day. Because as you hear, my voice diminishes, it comes back and goes. With every breath, exhale, inhale, is that ability to listen. Um, I know this is kind of getting out of there.
No, no, that's fine. I'm following you. I was just thinking that we're unfortunately we're coming to the end of our time together almost.
Hmm.
And so I thought it might be a good moment to talk shortly about your upcoming book, Earth Mind, before we sign off.
Oh, thank you, China. Earth mind is just a thought. Think about Earth mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about my accompanying or chaperoning two learned men, professors, one in quantum physics, the other one in humanitarian service, to a place in North and South Dakota called Standing Rock in the 2016-17, and how it changed their world. And through understanding Indigenous peoples, well, understanding what got them into their dilemma of cause and effect and beginning and ending and superior inferior, which is I call it a paradox. So how they're seeing their way, you know, how at the end of their lives, basically, that they too were born with that. And what covered that feeling of being original is still there. And by seeing emotions that we were living through ceremony, through the language in Lakota, where 14,000 people showed up to take care of the water. And so if you do something of earth, you're given something back. And so that's just the gist of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to be able to read it when it is finished.
Yeah. I would be glad if you read. The manuscript is finished, editing stages, and we're looking to early next year.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That's in the near future then.
Yes. Yes. It's been since 2017.
Mm.
But if you need to edit this out, it's fine. Because I met these two at a place, Half Moon Bay, Carlton Risk in Silicon Valley, when I went out to talk about light,
Mm-hmm.
along with the professor, the inventor of the Intel chip, who was an Italian fellow. He was in his 80 at that time, and how he stopped with that technology because he knew it was wrong, simply by taking a shower in the morning, and it came to him, and they paired us together, and it was the same feeling as being a Sundancer, and that's another story. But I have so many of those stories, and it was about light, which is sound, as you know. Pythagoras said, um, "Matter is only, but matter is only light." Something about uh, materialized. Light is only sound materialized, something like that. So that's what we were thinking. And it was a great conference. I remember that 2015. And I met these two professors and older folks, and they had the idea. They wanted to interview me, and like, so we should do a book, they said. It's like, I don't think so. But they kept asking me. So I finally said, sure, but you cannot distort what I'm saying by adding your words so that we could sell the book in your society. It
Mm-hmm.
has to be what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good point to stop and say thank you so much for your stories and your thoughts. And it's so great to have this conversation with you, and I'm looking forward to our future conversations.
Great. Thank you. I felt very comfortable talking with you, China, and hopefully
Me
we'll see
too.
you talk in the future.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Listening with China Blue. I hope it inspires you to build your own listening practice. This begins as a daily practice of attentively listening without judgment. And ask yourself, what is your version of silence? If you want to learn more about me and my work, go to chinablueart.com, and please follow me on Facebook and at Instagram. Thank you.